The galaxy was quiet the night the Empire's fleet came. Worlds had learned to bow before its banners. Cities surrendered before the first strike. Civilizations bent their knees, whispering that it was better to obey than be erased. The Empire had taught obedience with fire, and no one dared to test their will. But this time, they reached too far. On the edge of a forgotten star, the fleet descended on a small world. It was not rich. It had no great armies. It had no powerful allies. To the Empire, it was simply another name to erase, another people to chain. The commanders called it a swift lesson. They said one broadcast of fire would make all other worlds afraid. Their ships blotted out the sky. Shadows fell over villages. Children ran, holding tight to their parents' hands. The ground shook as the first bombardment began. Fire rained down from above, and the Empire smiled in cold silence. But something was wrong. The soldiers who landed expected fear, but they found something else. The people did not scream for mercy. They did not beg. Their faces were tight, their eyes fixed on the horizon. It was as if they were waiting for something. And then, the waiting ended. A low sound moved through the air. At first it was faint, like thunder far away. Then it grew, sharper, heavier, shaking the very bones of the soldiers who stood on that soil. The Empire's officers turned their heads upward. Through the smoke, through the burning clouds, something broke through the sky. It was not one of their ships. The craft that descended looked brutal and strange. Its surface was blackened with scars of old wars. Its hull carried no Empire symbols, no marks of surrender. It came like a predator, silent except for the roar of its engines. And when it landed, the earth cracked beneath its weight. From the dark hull, a single symbol glowed. It was a flag. Not of the Empire. Not of any world the invaders had crushed before. It was a flag unknown to them, and yet it carried a presence that made even seasoned soldiers hesitate. The doors of the ship opened. Metal ground against metal. Smoke hissed outward. And a figure stepped into the light. It was human. The soldiers whispered to one another. The word spread quickly, uncertain, confused. Human. Few had seen one. Many believed they were myths, a species too stubborn, too wild, too dangerous to live among the stars. The Empire had avoided them for centuries, leaving them hidden on the edges of the map. Now, one stood before them. The human's armor was not polished. It was battered, scratched, marked by battles no Empire soldier could name. In one hand, the figure carried a weapon heavy enough to crush a man. In the other, a simple blade, old and sharp. The visor of the helmet lifted, and the human's eyes burned with fire. The soldiers raised their rifles. The officers shouted. But something in those eyes made them hesitate. It was not fear. It was not surrender. It was fury, deep and quiet, like a storm waiting to break. The human spoke. The words were calm, but each one fell like a hammer. You came to teach obedience. You came to make them bow. But you forgot one thing. Humans don't bow. Before the soldiers could fire, the human moved. The speed was unnatural. The first squad fell before they could even aim. Armor cracked. Rifles shattered. Sparks lit the battlefield as the blade tore through metal and flesh alike. The Empire was trained for many enemies, but not this. Not the storm that came with every step the human took. From above, the commanders watched in disbelief. Their fleet, strong enough to burn worlds, now looked small before a single warrior. They ordered more troops to land. They ordered fire from the sky. Yet nothing slowed the advance. The villagers who had been waiting began to rise. They saw the human, and hope struck their hearts like fire. They did not run anymore. They stood. They shouted. The fear that had chained them broke in an instant. The Empire came for obedience. But in their arrogance, they had awakened vengeance. The night burned with screams, with gunfire, with the sound of steel breaking bone. And above it all, the human's voice carried, sharp and unshaken. This is not your galaxy to rule. This is not your world to own. You thought humanity was gone. You were wrong. The fleet commander stared at the screens, unable to believe what he saw. His hand trembled as he whispered to himself. One human, only one. But already, The truth was clear. The Empire had made its mistake. The galaxy had been taught fear, but now it would learn something greater. It would learn why humanity had been left alone. And as the fires rose higher, as the soldiers broke and ran, the first whispers began to spread. Whispers that would grow into shouts across 1,000 worlds. The humans had returned. And they were not here to bow. The smoke still drifted above the burning fields when the Empire's fleet began to regroup. Their first assault had failed, and the commanders could not understand why. A single human had torn through squads of trained soldiers. That was impossible. It should have been impossible. On the ground, the villagers gathered around the human warrior. They whispered, afraid but filled with awe. For the first time in years, they looked at the sky and did not see only despair. They saw hope. The human stood silent, scanning the horizon, waiting for the next move. The Empire did not wait long. More transports broke through the clouds. Heavier units this time. Armored walkers with weapons that could burn a building in one strike. Hundreds of soldiers marched in formation, rifles glowing with power. The commanders had given an order, crush the human at all costs. The soldiers moved with precision. They had destroyed civilizations. They had slaughtered armies. To them, this would be no different. They were sure their numbers would be enough. But as the thunder of boots shook the ground, the human only smiled. The villagers did not understand. Why smile in the face of death? But the human knew something the Empire had forgotten. Numbers did not win battles. Fear and fire could be broken. And when they broke, everything changed. The first walker opened fire. Beams of red light cut across the fields. Trees burst into flame. The villagers screamed and ran for cover. But the human did not move. Instead, the warrior raised a small device to the sky and pressed a switch. The clouds split open. From the blackness above, another shape descended. It was not a fleet. It was not even a warship. It was something older, something the human had kept hidden for years. A battleship, scarred and ancient, but alive with power. Its guns turned downward, locking onto the walkers below. The Empire's soldiers froze. The battleship fired once. The blast tore a crater in the ground, flipping one walker into the air like a toy. The noise shook the mountains. The second blast came, and another machine vanished in fire. Panic rippled through the soldiers' ranks. This was not the battle they had prepared for. The human charged forward. Amid the chaos, the warrior became a storm once again. The rifle bolts flashed, but the human weaved through them with terrifying speed. The blade struck again and again, cutting through armor and flesh. A squad tried to surround the human, but they were gone in moments, broken by a single sweeping strike. From the ship above, heavy guns roared, cutting down the Empire's numbers faster than they could regroup. The commanders screamed at their soldiers to hold the line, but even they could hear the fear rising in their voices. The villagers saw it too. For the first time, they saw the Empire's army not as gods of war but as men who could bleed, who could break, who could run. One boy, no more than 12, stood at the edge of the battlefield. His father pulled him back, but the boy could not look away. His voice shook, but he spoke the words that everyone was thinking. The human fights for us. The words spread. From lips to lips, from heart to heart. Soon the villagers were shouting, their voices rising over the thunder of guns. The human fought, and the people found their courage again. The Empire's second wave collapsed. Walkers burned. Soldiers scattered. The once perfect lines of their march had broken into chaos. The fleet commander slammed his fist into the console. His face was pale. How can one warrior do this? He demanded. But deep inside, he already knew the answer. It was not just one warrior. It was what the warrior carried with them, the fire of a species that had never learned to kneel. The battle raged until the night grew dark. At last, the few surviving soldiers of the Empire fled back to their transports. They left the field scorched, their machines shattered, their pride in ruins. The villagers stood in silence, staring at the battlefield. Smoke curled upward, lit by the glow of burning wreckage. The human walked among them, helmet under one arm, eyes cold and sharp. No one spoke for a long time. Then an elder stepped forward, voice trembling. Why do you fight for us? The human looked at the villagers. For a moment, the warrior seemed almost tired, almost weary of the blood. Then the answer came, simple and heavy. Because the Empire thinks you are weak. Because they think you belong to them. And because once, humans were called weak too. The elder bowed his head. The villagers followed, not in obedience but in respect. They had seen something the galaxy had long forgotten. They had seen what it meant when a human rose to fight. But far above, the Empire's fleet was not finished. In the flagship, the commander's eyes were dark with rage. Send word to the Emperor. Tell him we have found the humans again. And this time, we will erase them. The stars outside the window seemed to flicker. Somewhere, deep in the galaxy, a storm was beginning to rise. And the Empire, for all its fire and fury, had no idea what was coming. The night was not silent after the battle. The fields still burned, smoke rising into the sky like black scars. The villagers stayed awake, too afraid to sleep, too shaken by what they had seen. They whispered about the human, the warrior who had fought like no other. Some whispered in fear, others in awe. The human sat apart, cleaning the blade. Each movement was calm, practiced, as if this fight had been only another in a long line of battles. But the eyes told a different story. They were sharp, yes, but heavy, as if carrying memories too dark to speak aloud. Far above, the Empire's fleet hung in orbit. The commander stood at the wide glass of his bridge, fists clenched. His forces had been broken twice. His soldiers were restless, his officers whispering behind his back. He had been promised that this mission would be simple. A minor world. An easy victory. A lesson in obedience. Now, a single human had turned it into disaster. The commander's voice was low, filled with rage. Prepare the third wave. No mistakes. I want the human alive. The Emperor must see this creature for himself. When the next dawn came, the villagers heard the sky scream again. This time it was not transports or walkers. It was something worse. The Empire sent hunters. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were bred for one purpose: tracking, cornering, and killing the most dangerous prey. Their armor was black as night, their helmets sharp and faceless. They carried weapons designed not to destroy but to disable, to trap, to drag their enemies alive back to the fleet. The villagers trembled. Even they had heard of the hunters. Whole armies had fallen to them. Worlds had been silenced forever once the hunters walked their soil. But the human only stood, watching the dark shapes descend from the sky. So they send their hounds, the warrior murmured. The voice was calm, but the villagers saw the hand tighten around the weapon's grip. The hunters came fast. They did not march in lines. They spread out like shadows, silent, invisible among the burning trees. Villagers held their breath, but the human closed their eyes, listening. The first hunter struck. A net of burning light flew from the shadows, aiming to trap the human. But in a flash, the warrior's blade cut through it, sparks falling to the ground. A second hunter leapt forward, claws of steel reaching for the target. The human spun, and with one strike, the claws shattered. But the hunters were not weak. They came together, faster than eyes could follow. Their weapons twisted the air, their movements silent and deadly. For the first time, the villagers saw the human forced backward, blocked by attacks coming from every side. One hunter drove a spear of energy into the ground, trapping the human inside a ring of crackling light. The others moved in, sure of their capture. The villagers cried out, certain it was the end. And then, the human laughed. It was not loud. It was not wild. It was quiet, cold, and filled with something the hunters did not understand. You think you are predators, the human said. You've never met one. The ground shook. From above, the old battleship answered the call. Its guns fired into the forest, trees exploding in flame. The hunters staggered, their perfect formation broken. That was all the human needed. The warrior moved like a storm unleashed. One hunter fell, then another, their black armor split apart. The blade cut through weapons, claws, traps. Sparks lit the dawn as the hunters, creatures that had killed thousands, died one by one. When the last stood, cornered, it tried to flee. But the human was faster. In seconds, it lay broken in the dirt, visor cracked, eyes wide with something rare among hunters, fear. The villagers erupted in shouts. They could not believe it. The hunters were legends of death, yet they had fallen like all the rest. The human stood tall, breathing heavy but steady. Blood and smoke covered the armor. Slowly, the warrior lifted the last hunter's broken mask and spoke words for the sky to hear. "Tell your emperor. If he wants humanity, he must come himself. But if he comes, he will not return." Above, on the fleet's flagship, the commander's face turned pale as the message reached his ears. The bridge went silent. Officers who had once boasted of conquest now shifted uneasily, eyes filled with doubt. The commander's voice cracked with fury. "If the emperor hears of this failure, I am finished. Prepare the armada. If one human can do this much, then we must burn the entire world to ash." But even as he shouted, whispers spread among his crew. Whispers that the Empire had awakened something it should have left sleeping. And below, on the ground, the villagers gathered around the human. They did not call the warrior a savior. They did not call them a soldier. They called them what they truly were, vengeance given flesh. The storm was only beginning. The hunters were gone, their black armor left broken on the soil. The villagers thought the danger had passed, but the human did not relax. The warrior stood at the edge of the village, staring at the sky as if waiting for something greater. The villagers gathered, voices low. Some wanted to celebrate. Others wanted to hide, fearing the Empire would return with even more power. An elder stepped forward, his voice trembling. "What happens now?" The human turned, eyes sharp. "Now," the warrior said, "the Empire stops playing games. They will come with everything they have." The words froze the villagers' hearts. And the human was right. Far above, the Empire's commander raged inside his flagship. His hands trembled as he read the reports: squads destroyed, walkers shattered, hunters slaughtered. His pride was gone, his soldiers restless. He knew the Emperor would not forgive this failure. So he gave the order. The fleet began to move. Warships, cruisers, destroyers, an armada built to crush whole civilizations. They spread across the orbit like a wall of fire. Their guns pointed downward, ready to erase the small world in one strike. On the ground, the human watched as the sky filled with red light. The villagers cried out, some falling to their knees. They had seen worlds burned before. They knew what was coming. But the human's voice cut through the fear. "Listen to me. You are not slaves. You are not animals to be hunted. Stand with me, and we will show them what it means to face humanity." The villagers hesitated. They had no weapons, no ships, no armies. But something in the human's voice lit a spark in their hearts. Slowly, one by one, they nodded. The human ship, the scarred battleship, rose from its resting place, engines roaring. Its hull groaned, ancient but alive with power. The villagers climbed aboard, filling the dark corridors with nervous whispers. For many, it was the first time they had ever stepped onto a warship. The human stood at the command deck, hands steady on the controls. The ship rose higher, breaking through the clouds. And there it was, the full might of the Empire's fleet, waiting like a predator above the stars. The commander sneered as the single human ship appeared. "One vessel. Against us." He laughed, though the sound was brittle. "Crush them." The Empire's guns fired. Beams of red light tore through the void, filling the space with fire. The villagers screamed, clutching at the walls of the ship. But the human's hands moved quickly, guiding the vessel through the storm. The old battleship danced like a shadow, weaving between beams that should have ended it. The villagers could not believe it. To them, the Empire's fleet was invincible. But the human fought as if the stars themselves obeyed. The battleship struck back. Its cannons roared, sending spears of light into the nearest cruiser. The blast tore through its shields, ripping the ship apart in seconds. A ball of fire lit the dark, and for the first time, the Empire's armada staggered. The commander's smile vanished. He barked orders, voice cracking. "Surround them. Do not let that ship escape." But the human ship was not running. It struck again, tearing through another cruiser, then diving into the heart of the fleet. The villagers felt their fear melt into something new, excitement. They shouted as each Empire ship fell, their voices rising with hope. Yet the human's face stayed hard. The warrior knew the truth. This battle was far from over. The Empire had countless ships. The battleship was strong, but it was only one. And each strike brought more attention, more fury from the commander above. At last, the Empire unleashed its flagship. Larger than mountains, armed with weapons that could burn continents, it moved into position. Its shadow covered the stars. The villagers fell silent, their courage shaken. The humans stared at the massive vessel, eyes narrowed. Slowly, the warrior whispered, "So the real fight begins." The flagship's guns charged, glowing brighter than suns. The commander leaned forward, eyes burning with hate. "End them." The void filled with fire as the flagship fired. The battleship shook violently, alarms screaming through its corridors. Panels exploded, sparks flying. Villagers cried out in terror. For the first time, it seemed the human might not survive. But through the chaos, the warrior's voice cut sharp and steady. "Hold on. We're not done yet." The battleship dove, engines screaming, slipping between the beams of light. It fired back, striking the flagship's armor. The impact shook the giant, but it did not fall. The battle became a storm. Fire lit the void, ships breaking, debris falling into the planet's sky like shooting stars. And in the heart of it, one human stood unbroken. The villagers saw it now. This was no ordinary warrior. This was vengeance. This was defiance. This was the fire the Empire had feared for centuries. The commander's hands shook as he realized the truth. "If one human can do this," he whispered, "what happens if there are more?" The thought filled him with a fear deeper than any defeat. And still, the battle raged on. The void burned with war. Empire ships filled the stars, their guns turning the night into endless fire. The humans' battleship fought among them like a wolf in a pack of hounds, striking hard, vanishing, and striking again. Villagers clung to the walls of the ship as alarms blared. Some prayed, others wept, but their eyes stayed fixed on the warrior who commanded the vessel. Every movement of the humans' hands kept them alive, every order sharp and certain. Still, the truth was clear, the Empire's fleet was endless. For every cruiser destroyed, another took its place. For every victory, the sky seemed darker with enemy fire. At the heart of the Armada, the Empire's flagship loomed, weapons glowing brighter with every strike. The commander stood on its bridge, jaw tight. "They cannot fight forever," he hissed. "I will bury them here. No human will survive this day." The battleship dove through the chaos, but the villagers saw the damage building. Fires burned along the hull. Shields flickered, broken in places. One engine groaned with every burst of power. The villagers looked at the human, their fear plain. The warrior met their eyes, calm but fierce. "Listen to me. This is not the end. As long as we fight, they are afraid. Do you understand? They fear us more than we fear them." The words lit something inside the villagers. They had thought themselves powerless, but now they saw it, the mighty empire trembling before one human. Their voices rose, shouting, filling the ship with courage. But courage did not stop the flagship. It moved closer, its massive guns charging again. The void filled with red light, brighter than a rising sun. The villagers shielded their eyes. The humans' jaw tightened. "They're going to fire." The blast came. A beam of pure destruction cut through the darkness, striking the battleship full. The vessel shuddered, alarms screaming. Villagers fell to the floor, smoke filling the air. Panels sparked, lights flickered. For a moment, it seemed the ship was finished. The commander on the flagship smiled. "At last," he whispered. But the smile died. Through the smoke, the battleship's engines roared again. Scarred, burning, but still alive, the vessel surged forward. Its guns fired back, slamming into the flagship's armor. The Empire's giant staggered, shields cracking. The villagers cheered, their voices fierce with hope. But the humans' eyes stayed cold. "We hurt them," the warrior said. "But they will not stop until we are ash." And the human was right. The commander snarled, slamming his hand on the console. "If this world gives them shelter, then the world itself must die. Aim the planet killer." Gasps filled the bridge. Even his own officers looked shocked. The weapon was forbidden except in the greatest wars. But the commander's rage was too deep. "Do it," he screamed. Burn the world to nothing. On the surface, the villagers who had stayed behind saw the sky glow with deadly light. Shadows stretched across the land as the weapon charged. The ground trembled with its power. In the battleship, the villagers panicked. "They will destroy us all," one cried. The human's voice was steady. "Not if I stop them." The warrior turned the ship toward the flagship, engines burning beyond their limits. The villagers shouted in shock. "You can't. That ship is too big." But the human did not listen. Hands flew across the controls, setting the course straight into the heart of the Empire's giant. The commander's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. No, no. They wouldn't dare. But he saw the truth. Humans always dared. The battleship roared, flames trailing from its broken hull as it charged the flagship. Guns fired in every direction, cutting down smaller ships that tried to block the path. Nothing slowed it. The villagers held on to each other, tears in their eyes, but none begged for the human to stop. They understood now. This was not just a fight. This was vengeance. The flagship's weapon reached full power, its glow brighter than the stars. The commander screamed for it to fire. But before the order could be carried out, the human's ship struck. The collision shook the void. Fire erupted across the sky as the battleship smashed into the flagship's side. Explosions tore through the giant, its armor cracking, its weapons silenced. The villagers cried out, some in despair, some in triumph. The human stood tall at the command deck, smoke and fire around them, eyes fixed on the burning flagship. "This ends now," the warrior said. And then, silence fell, broken only by the sound of ships dying in the dark. But even as the flagship burned, even as the villagers thought victory was close, the human knew the truth. The Empire was vast. This was only one battle. And now the Emperor himself would hear of it. The storm was far from over. The wreck of the Empire's flagship burned in the dark, its shattered hull drifting like a broken crown across the stars. For a moment, the void was silent. The villagers aboard the human's battleship stared in disbelief. They had seen the impossible, an armada torn apart, a giant brought down. But the human did not smile. The warrior stood at the cracked command deck, one hand pressed against the console, eyes fixed on the void. Smoke filled the air, sparks hissed from ruined panels. The battleship had survived, but only just. Its engines groaned, shields were gone, and whole sections lay in fire. The villagers began to whisper. "We won," one said. "The Empire will run." The human shook their head. "No. The real war begins now." And the words came true. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. Worlds that had lived in silence for centuries now whispered a forbidden word, human. In dark corners of space, slaves lifted their heads. Rebels sharpened their blades. The impossible had happened, the Empire had bled. And on the throne world, the Emperor himself listened. The Emperor was not like his soldiers. He was old, older than many stars, his power wrapped in fear and cruelty. When he heard that a single human had destroyed one of his greatest fleets, his voice was soft, but every soul in the chamber trembled. "Bring me the human," he said. "Alive, if possible. Dead, if not. They think they know vengeance. Let them learn fear." The Empire's legions moved. Larger fleets prepared, weapons forbidden for centuries awakened. Across the stars, an order spread, no mercy, no hesitation, no retreat. The human would be crushed, and the galaxy would watch. On the broken battleship, the villagers worked to repair what they could. They carried water, patched walls, dragged the wounded from the flames. For the first time in their lives, they labored not in chains but with hope. The human moved among them, scarred armor dented, blade still stained. The villagers asked questions in hushed voices. "Why do they fear you so much?" one boy asked. The warrior paused. The eyes were distant, heavy with memory. "Because once, long ago, humans fought them. And we did not lose." The boy's eyes widened. "But where are the others?" The human's voice grew quiet. "Sleeping. Waiting. Hidden in places the Empire does not dare to look. They thought if they left us alone, the fire would fade. They were wrong." The villagers stared, stunned. Could it be true? Were there more? If one human could shatter a fleet, What would many do? But before the questions could grow, alarms screamed again. The stars lit up as a new fleet arrived, larger, darker, deadlier than the one before. At its center was a ship blacker than night, carrying the Emperor's personal guard. The villagers froze. Some wept. "It is hopeless," one whispered. "We cannot fight this." The humans stood tall, shoulders squared despite the battered armor. "Hopeless? No. This is when we fight hardest." The Emperor's fleet opened fire. Beams brighter than suns ripped across the void. The battleship shook under the storm, its wounded hull groaning. The villagers cried out as explosions burst around them. The human moved to the controls, voice sharp. "Hold steady. We are not done." The battleship struck back. Its cannons roared, blasting into the nearest destroyer, tearing it apart. Another followed, shields collapsing in fire. But the Empire's numbers were endless. For each ship destroyed, 10 more closed in. On the Emperor's black vessel, the guards watched in silence. They had been trained from birth to serve death. They had heard the legends of humans, but they did not believe them. Now, as they saw the lone battleship carve through their fleet, doubt touched even their hearts. Still, the Emperor's command was absolute. The guards prepared to descend, ready to face the human directly. On the battleship, the villagers felt the ship shake as enemy troops boarded. The sound of metal grinding echoed through the halls. Fear spread, but the human only drew the blade once more. "Stay behind me," the warrior said. "If they want me, they will have to take me through fire." The first door burst open. Black-armored guards flooded in, weapons glowing. Their voices were silent, their steps perfect. The villagers screamed, but the human moved first. The blade sang through the air, sparks lighting the corridor. One guard fell, then another. The battle raged inside the ship, steel clashing against steel, gunfire tearing the dark. The villagers watched in awe as the human fought like a storm made flesh. But even as the guards fell, more came. Endless, relentless. And above, the Emperor's eyes gleamed. "Let them struggle," he whispered. "Let them bleed. I will crush them myself when the time comes." The storm had reached its peak. The galaxy held its breath. And still, the humans stood, unbroken. The corridors of the battleship burned with fire and smoke. The Emperor's guards fought without fear, their black armor gleaming, their weapons cutting through steel. The villagers huddled in the shadows, clutching each other, watching as the human faced the storm alone. The warrior's blade flashed again and again, carving through the endless tide. Each strike was fast, brutal, unstoppable. Guards fell, but for every one defeated, another pushed forward. The air filled with sparks and screams, the sound of war echoing through the wounded ship. At last, the final guard collapsed in silence, his armor cracked, his weapon falling to the floor. The villagers cried out in relief. But the human did not rest. The warrior stood among the fallen, chest heaving, eyes locked on the view outside. For there, in the void, the Emperor's ship waited. It was larger than any vessel they had faced, blacker than the deepest night. Its surface glowed with lines of crimson light, alive with weapons forbidden for centuries. The very sight of it made the villagers tremble. And then, a voice filled the air. Cold. Vast. It echoed through every speaker, every channel, as if the stars themselves spoke. Human. The villagers froze. It was the Emperor. His voice was calm, yet every syllable pressed on their hearts like chains. "You have shamed my fleets. You have broken my hunters. You have defied my empire. But your story ends here. Come to me, and I will show the galaxy that even humans bow before me." The villagers looked to the human in terror. "You cannot face him," one whispered. "He is too strong." The warrior's eyes burned. "Stronger than me. We will see." The battleship moved forward, scarred and broken but unyielding. It cut through the wreckage of fallen ships, heading straight for the Emperor's vessel. The villagers held their breath as the two giants closed in. The Emperor's ship unleashed its fury. Beams brighter than suns tore across the void, shaking the human's vessel to its core. Explosions ripped through its hull, fires spreading. The villagers screamed, clutching each other, certain it was the end. But the human did not falter. "Hold on," the warrior shouted, steering the battleship through the storm. The old ship groaned but pushed forward, its cannons roaring one last time. The shots struck the Emperor's shields, cracking them, but not breaking. The black ship loomed larger, unstoppable. Then, the human made their choice. "Get to the escape pods," the warrior commanded. The villagers shook their heads. "No, we won't leave you." The human's voice was sharp, unyielding. "This is not your fight to finish. Go. Live. Tell the galaxy what you saw here. Tell them humanity is not gone." Tears filled the villagers' eyes, but they obeyed. They fled into the pods, one by one, hearts heavy with both fear and pride. Alone on the command deck, the human turned the battleship toward the Emperor's vessel. The warrior's hand rested on the blade, eyes blazing with fire. The Emperor's voice came again, mocking. "You think one broken warrior can defy me? I am eternal. I am the Empire." The human's reply was steady, filled with fury. "No. You are only fear. And fear can burn." The battleship roared forward, engines screaming, every weapon firing at once. The void became fire as the wounded vessel hurled itself at the Emperor's ship. The collision was like the birth of a star, blinding, endless, shaking the heavens themselves. The villagers' pods drifted far away, but even from the distance they saw it, the Emperor's vessel torn apart in an explosion brighter than the sun's. The shockwave rattled their ships, but they held on, eyes wide with awe. The Emperor's voice vanished. The black vessel cracked, split, and was consumed by fire. The unbreakable symbol of the Empire was gone. And with it, the human's battleship was lost. Silence fell across the stars. The villagers wept, but their tears were not only of sorrow. They had seen something the galaxy had forgotten. They had seen what it meant when a human rose to fight. Across the galaxy, whispers spread faster than fire. On slave worlds, chains began to break. On conquered planets, voices rose in defiance. Everywhere, the story was the same. The Empire sought obedience. And instead, it found humanity's vengeance. The villagers carried the tale wherever they went. They spoke of a lone warrior who fought an armada, who defied an emperor, who showed the stars that fear could be broken. And in the dark places of the galaxy, where even the Empire did not look, something stirred. For the human had spoken the truth. Humanity was not gone. It was waiting. And now, the galaxy was ready for them to return.